History isn't just a list of names, it's a series of rhythms. Before the Roman peace, the rhythm was chaos. 100 years of civil war that left the Mediterranean world shattered, bleeding, and exhausted. Power-hungry generals used their legions like personal toys, marching on their own capital to settle scores. For the average person, life was a coin toss between poverty and a sudden, violent end. The assassination of Julius Caesar was meant to save the old republic, but it only triggered a final, explosive power struggle. The world was holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally win. That winner was Octavian, Caesar's heir. He wasn't the greatest general, but he was the greatest politician. He realized that a tired world would trade its voting rights for a silent, stable street. In 27 BC, he took the name Augustus. He became the first emperor, hitting the mute button on a century of screaming war. This was the start of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Augustus knew that peace isn't just the absence of war, it's the presence of a system. He professionalized the army, moving them to the frontiers to protect the empire rather than threaten it. For the first time, a person could walk from the rainy hills of Britain to the desert sun of Egypt and never leave the protection of the Roman law. The world had become a single, safe unit. The Mediterranean Sea, once the playground of pirates and rival navies, became Mare Nostrum, our sea. It was effectively turned into a giant Roman lake, safe for trade and travel. This peace wasn't just a lucky break, it was an investment. Augustus spent his reign building the foundations, literally and figuratively, for a 200-year golden era. The Roman peace was about to prove that when you stop fighting, you start building. And what they built would redefine Western civilization forever. The first pillar of the peace was movement. The Romans built 50,000 miles of roads, stone-paved highways that were the high-speed internet of the ancient world. These roads were engineered with layers of gravel and drainage, meant to last for centuries. They were so straight they seemed to defy the curves of the earth itself, traveled at the speed of a horse. An order from the emperor in Rome could reach the frontier in days, keeping the entire empire connected to a single heartbeat. But roads only moved people. Aqueducts moved life. The Romans mastered gravity, carrying fresh water over hundreds of miles to feed their exploding cities. This water fueled the public baths, the social heart of Rome. Here, the peace was maintained through gossip, business, and shared relaxation. In the steam, the difference between a rich merchant and a poor worker disappeared. The baths were where you learned what it meant to be Roman. The secret to this permanence was concrete. Roman concrete could set underwater, allowing for the construction of harbors and domes that still stand 2,000 years later. Concrete allowed for the Pantheon, a dome so perfect it wasn't surpassed for a millennium. It was a temple to all the gods, but also to Roman engineering. And then, the Colosseum, a machine for entertainment that could hold 50,000 people. It was the world's first stadium, designed for total crowd control. These structures sent a message to the world. Rome isn't just a city, it's a permanent state of being. And the peace makes it all possible. With the roads safe and the sea clear, the Roman economy became the first truly globalized system. One currency, the silver denarius, was the key to everything. Trade reached a scale the world had never seen. A merchant in Rome could sell olive oil from Spain to buy silk from China and spices from India. This created a massive middle class. Shopkeepers, bakers, and craftsmen flourished in cities that were cleaner and safer than any that came before. Agriculture became industrial. North Africa and Egypt became the breadbasket of the empire, shipping millions of tons of grain to feed the city of Rome. To prevent unrest, the emperors provided the annona, a free ration of grain. It was the birth of the welfare state, funded by the fruits of the peace. And then there was the entertainment. Chariot racing at the Circus Maximus was the most popular sport in history, keeping the masses happy and distracted. Bread and circuses ensured that even the poorest Roman citizen felt like they were part of the greatest success story in human history. The wealth was so great that Rome even traded with the Han Dynasty in China. The two greatest empires on earth were linked by a thread of silk and silver. For 200 years, the Mediterranean world was a single humming machine of commerce. The borders were open, the taxes were low, and the money was good. But this golden age required a guard. Behind every merchant and every baker stood the silent iron presence of the Roman legion. While the roads moved the body of the empire, the law moved its soul. Rome created a legal system so logical and universal that it applied to everyone, from the peaks of the Alps to the shores of the Nile. They pioneered the concept that the burden of proof lies with the accuser. This idea, that you are innocent until proven guilty, became the bedrock of justice for the next 2,000 years. Latin became the universal language of ambition. Whether you were a poet in Gaul or a lawyer in Syria, if you spoke Latin, you could speak to the entire world. Citizenship was no longer just for the people of Rome. It was slowly extended to everyone, turning conquered subjects into Romans with rights and a future. This stability allowed for the rise of Stoicism. This philosophy taught that true peace comes from within, giving the Roman elite a mental armor against the chaos of life. But the peace also provided the perfect environment for a small religious movement from Judea, Christianity. Without the safety of Roman roads, the message would have stayed local. Early apostles like Paul utilized the Pax Romana to travel thousands of miles, using their Roman citizenship as a shield to protect them as they spread their new faith. By the time the government realized how quickly the movement was growing, the network was already too vast to stop. The peace had acted as a greenhouse for a global revolution. The old gods of Olympus began to fade into the background as the shared culture of the empire moved toward a unified, monotheistic identity. Rome was no longer just a place on a map. It was a shared mindset. To be Roman was to belong to a system that felt like it would last forever. But the peace was never peaceful at the edges. Along the Rhine and the Danube, and at Hadrian's Wall in Britain, the Roman legion stood as a wall against the wild. These soldiers were the frontier's greatest engineers. They built the forts and infrastructure that would eventually grow into the foundations of modern London, Paris, and Vienna. But maintaining this wall was a massive drain on the empire. As the climate cooled and tribes from the north began to move, the pressure on the Roman borders became unbearable. The cost of the military spiraled out of control. To pay the soldiers, the emperors began to devalue the currency, mixing cheap lead into the silver coins. Then came the plagues. Trade routes that once brought silk and spices now brought disease, wiping out up to a quarter of the population in some areas. Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors, spent his life defending the borders while writing about the fragility of existence. When he died, the Golden Age died with him. The year 180 marked the end. The era of the philosopher kings was replaced by the era of the soldier emperors, where the throne was bought with blood. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguards, became the ultimate kingmakers, literally auctioning off the empire to the highest bidder. The roads that once facilitated trade now facilitated invasion. The same straight paths that moved Roman legions now allowed Germanic tribes to strike deep into the heart of Italy. The Great Peace was over. The Mediterranean was no longer a Roman lake, but a fractured landscape of fear and fortification. The operating system was crashing, but a miracle that lasts 200 years doesn't just vanish. The Pax Romana had hardwired the world so deeply that its influence can be felt in every room you enter today. If you speak Spanish, French, Italian, or Portuguese, you are speaking modern Latin. The languages of the Pax Romana are still the primary way half the world communicates. Our laws, our courts, and our very definition of justice are Roman. When a lawyer says habeas corpus or pro bono, they are using the tools of the Pax Romana. Walk through any major city and you'll see it. The grids of our streets, the arches of our buildings, and the sewers beneath our feet are all Roman ideas. Even the standard width of our railroad tracks can be traced back to the ruts left by Roman chariots on the roads of Britain. We are literally on their tracks. The Pax Romana proved that diversity isn't a weakness, it's an engine. For 200 years, different cultures were united under a single system that worked for everyone. Every great empire that followed, from the British to the Americans, has looked back at those 2 centuries as the ultimate high-water mark of civilization. It reminds us that peace is not an accident. It is a fragile, expensive, and difficult project that requires constant maintenance and a commitment to the common good. We may live in a high-tech world, but we are still walking on Roman foundations. Every time you use a road, a court, or a coin, you are a citizen of the Pax Romana. The Roman peace wasn't just a period of time, it was the birth of the West. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.